environment for private sector engagement and scaling up green investments. However, Rwanda's efforts are just one example. Across the continent, we must collectively enhance the investability of our NDCs. Our NDCs should not only aim for emission reduction, but also drive economic growth, create jobs, and enhance resilience. This forum provides an invaluable opportunity to share best practices and discuss strategies for making our NDCs both implementable but also finance-backed. We must also ensure that climate action is integrated into our national planning and development strategies. As African nations, we are uniquely positioned to lead in areas such as methane reduction, nature-based solutions, and just transitions. Transformational implementation, unlocking climate finance, and enhancing resilience must be our guiding principles as we move forward. In closing, I encourage all of you to lead with bold ambition. This forum is not just a space for reflection, it is a platform for action. Let us ensure that the outcomes of this gathering resonate across the continent as we prepare for the next round of NDCs. Together, let's commit to crafting ambitious, implementable, and finance-backed NDCs that not only mitigate climate change, but also drive growth and resilience for our communities. Thank you for your kind attention, and I look forward to fruitful discussions and collaborations ahead. Together we can and must turn our aspirations into concrete actions for a sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Very inspiring, and without further ado, I hand over to Miriam Hinestrosa for her welcoming words. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Romeo. Minister, dear participants, colleagues, welcome on behalf of the United Nations Environment Programme and all the other agencies. I should name them for fairness. Our UNEP convened, CCAC, Climate and Clean Air Coalition, the NDC Partnership, the UNFCCC Secretariat, UNDP, and our dear colleagues from the Africa Development Bank. Thank you for joining us in presence today and also for joining us online. We, the partners, extend our gratitude to the Rwandan government for their generous hospitality. Their support, despite facing numerous climate-related and health challenges these days, is truly commendable. We really appreciate having you all gathered here and again online to address, as our Minister of Environment said, Africa's critical role on shaping global climate action. This Forum for Africa marks the culmination of our global series of NDC 3.0 fora, supporting the 2025 NDC cycle update. Our journey started in the Pacific, and we moved to Latin America in Bogota. Then we moved to Eastern Europe and Central Asia in Istanbul, the MENA region in Tunis, and Asia Pacific in Bangkok just last week. Each forum has reinforced the global commitment to the Paris agreement 1.5 degrees Celsius goal alignment. The common message from previous regions is that while climate change poses an existential threat, it also presents opportunities for transformation. As we convene in the vibrant city here in Kigali, and it's my pleasure to be here for the second time. The first time was in 2016, where we also organized the Africa Carbon Forum together with the Rwandan government. This gathering demonstrates the collective determination to adopt clean technologies, to change production and consumption patterns, to transition to renewable and efficient energy matrix, and amplify Africa's critical role in global climate action. We recognize not only the urgency of the task, but also the immense potential for positive change it represents, reaffirming our commitment to shaping a resilient and sustainable future for the continent and the world. Still, we should be reminded of the last IPCC and the UNEP-led GAP reports. These reports paint a stark picture for climate crisis, but they also offer a roadmap for action. While Africa and the Global South have contributed the least to global emissions, they stand at the forefront of climate impacts. This adversity is sparking resilience and innovation. As we heard, the structural, social, and economic challenges faced by the Global South have forged communities of resourceful problem solvers and grassroots leaders. Countries in Africa and the Global South are not merely victims of climate change, but active pioneers in the fight against it, developing innovative solutions born from necessity and deep understanding of local circumstances, demonstrating that effective solutions often emerge from those most affected by the challenges. The impacts of climate change in Africa are well known. They are already here, and we perhaps can relate these outbreaks of viruses to climate change. Last week, someone said we can't blame climate change for everything, but we cannot deny that, unfortunately, we are seeing things that we still don't know the sources they are provoking. It's affecting millions through water scarcity, disrupted agriculture, all leading to food scarcity. And this is not only an issue for Africa, it's an issue for all continents. Climate disasters cost the continent's billions, diverting resources from development efforts. We see rising sea levels, endangered coastal cities, especially in West Africa, while competition over resources fuels conflict and migration. Vulnerable populations, particularly women, children, and the poor, bear the brunt of these effects. However, these challenges offer a chance for transformative actions. Our NDCs must then address challenges head-on, turning crisis into catalyst for sustainable development and resilience. Let's make our collective promise to our children and grandchildren. As we approach next round of NDCs, 4 key actions are vital, and these have been already mentioned by the Minister, but let me just briefly remind us all. It should raise ambition, because the science says so. We should maintain the 1.5 degrees Celsius commitment. African nations are already showing leadership, but we need bolder targets and a stronger action. Greater integration. I think it's also having mentioned, climate actions must align with broader sustainable development goals, and not only that, we need to break down silos between ministries and sectors, creating holistic strategies that address climate change while driving economic growth, as we heard, job creation, and social equity. We should make also our NDCs 3.0 implementable. And we can discuss what implementable means, but I think we are going to hear these days different approaches to this. We must acknowledge there is a finance gap. We are not even, and I'm not saying this because of personal views, but I've heard this across the regions. Some saying we have not even started the implementation of our 2020 cycle NDC, and we have to update the 2025 cycle. But this is reality. We should keep having into account while we draft our 3.0 NDCs. Another point is accountability and transparency. The upcoming biannual transparency reports, which are to be submitted in December this year, offer a chance to track progress, build trust, and foster collaboration within and beyond Africa. As we speak, you know, many of you also are in charge of working with these BTRs, and the challenges are already emerging with regards to what to put in the NDC tracking. And this is an issue that we are also going to discuss these days. In our journey to bring climate stability, the United Nations Environment Programme is playing a critical role in helping African countries tackle climate change through comprehensive support that addresses both the present challenges and future ambitions in line with NDCs. UNEP provides critical support through analytical tools and the setting of robust baselines for GHG emissions. By leveraging established networks, sectoral assessments, and drawing on the NDC Action Project funded by the German IKI, UNEP helps countries develop and enhance their climate action. This support includes comprehensive data analysis, sector-specific insights, and expanded initiatives to ensure that NDCs are both ambitious and achievable. As we approach 2024 December, deadline for BTRs, UNEP is working with 63 countries in the continent, overall, many of them here in Africa, ensuring that they meet their reporting obligations on time. This helps build trust and accountability both regionally and globally. And our other partners, NDC Partnership, a global coalition that brings together over 200 members, facilitates coordinated response to country needs, driving implementation of current NDCs and supporting the rapid implementation and finances of NDCs 3.0. Through its global call and NDC 3.0 and long-term low-emission development strategies, countries receive expertise and resources to support NDC preparation. The United Nations Secretary General called upon the United Nations Development Programme to leverage the Climate Promise 2025 to drive the coordinated UN system-wide efforts on NDCs. Building on the original Climate Promise launched in 2019, which supported 85% of all developing country submissions, the Climate Promise 2025 aims to help countries align NDCs with a 1.5 degrees goal and the Sustainable Development Goals. Therefore, strengthening quality and investability and accelerate implementation to drive sustainable development with UN agencies and other partners like the NDC Partnership. The UNFCCC Secretariat, as the Secretariat to the Convention and the Paris Agreement, the Convention Secretariat supports the global response to climate change and Paris Agreement implementation. As other agencies, UNFCCC also provides capacity building, technical assistance, including through its regional collaborating centers for the preparation and communication of the next round of NDCs. Dear participants, UNEP and all partners that joined forces to organize this series of NDC 3.0 fora this year exemplifies the power of international cooperation in addressing the climate crisis. As we enhance our NDCs and more towards implementation, this partnership will be crucial in turning into climate ambitions in tangible actions and measurable results. Let me assure you, on behalf of all the partners and UNEP, our collective efforts don't end here. The organizing partners stand ready to support each of you every step of the way, whether it's formulating your NDCs or implementing the ambitious climate action plans, or helping you with the technology needs assessment, and building the robust systems needed for transparency. We are committed to bring these partners on this journey to you. Finally, I would repeat my appreciation and gratitude to the government of Rwanda and also the International Climate Initiative, ICI, which is the German government's International Climate and Biodiversity Funding Program. And in conclusion, thank you also for being here. I know it's challenging times. You had to make your decision to come personally or assist online. So therefore, thank you for being here. And I hope that the 3 days ahead brings you a lot of learning and experience sharing. Thank you very much.
And fully aware that we are a bit late, over to you. The youth representative from Kenya, Ms. Morrison.
Good morning. Good morning. All protocols observed. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and fellow advocates, Ngaramutse, bonjour, good morning, and in my father's tongue, Zalamkadze. Welcome to the NDC 3.0 Forum, which focuses on pathways to progress, crafting ambitious and implementable NDCs. My name is Mary Mudhoni Morrison. I am a Kenyan environmental attorney at law, and I stand before you today as a passionate environment and climate advocate, and as a youth and woman committed to driving positive change in Africa's response to climate challenges. I am honored to be here as we focus on a crucial part of the global climate change response, the NDCs, whose significance serve as a blueprint for each nation's effort for stronger economies and societies to combat climate change. For Africa, this means addressing the unique vulnerabilities we face, from food insecurity, driven by unpredictable weather patterns, to rising sea levels threatening coastal communities, from water scarcity to the impact on biodiversity, from pollution, which impacts our fundamental rights to health. The human face of climate change can be seen in many events. On a personal scale, my township area in Kenya, Mombasa, comprises of different types of dwelling. This is just an example. There are traditional homes too. On the onset of heavy rains, which resulted to flooding this year, I witnessed a lot of destruction of these homes, which set back the communities that live there. The human face of climate change can be seen in the continued actions that cause short-lived climate pollutants like methane, black carbon, and hydrofluorocarbons, which have drastic effects to the health and well-being of the people. The human face of climate change can be seen in the case of vanishing coastlines, changing ocean temperatures, and loss of culture. These stories are not isolated. It is one thread of a much bigger tapestry of climate vulnerability, and in truth, its impacts are profoundly unequal, and the most vulnerable bear the brunt. Understanding the nuances of the impact of climate change and measures to be undertaken make NDC commitments more crucial. While NDC and other climate action plans are country-specific, their impact is regional and global, and for us in Africa, the stakes couldn't be higher. Today, we come together at a pivotal moment to explore these pathways. The recent Emission Gap Report 2023 made it clear that the path we are on needs more action. But today is just not about reviewing sobering statistics. It's about action, ambition, and the future. The first Global Stocktake allows us to assess our progress and poses an important question. how do we expedite our efforts, and in a way that benefits everyone, especially the most vulnerable. Our NDCs frame the policies that guide us towards a thriving future in the wake of climate change. I believe that they offer a way to guarantee sustainable development, boost resilience, and cut emissions. Making sure that these principles result in meaningful action for our communities is the laborious part. The call to action from this workshop is then, how does that progress look like? On how we learn from our challenges and best practices and opportunities that can build a robust NDC. The third update of climate plans, due to be submitted in 2025, provides a chance for plans to create pathways for actions aligned to the 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature goal. Therefore, as we get towards reporting, there's a need to have holistic considerations and approaches in developing and implementing NDCs. As agreed by all parties under the UAE consensus at COP28, these plans should be aligned with the 1.5 pathway and cover all greenhouse gases and sectors, including energy, agriculture, land use and forestry, transport, industry, and waste. One important area for Africa is addressing the short-lived climate pollutants, which are far more potent in terms of their contribution. By reducing them, Africa has an immediate opportunity to improve public health, mitigate climate change, and build resilience. Inclusion of SLCPs in NDC looks like integrating air quality measures, comprehensive assessment, reporting approach in the enhanced transparency framework to drive finance, resources, and information into development and implementation. And I believe there will be a session on the short-lived climate pollutants. And yet, technical solutions will not suffice. Remember the human face? Yes, people are central in climate action. Notably, we must recognize the youth as our most valuable resource, with Africa having the youngest numbers globally. I believe that young people bring fresh perspective, innovative solution, and relentless drive. They are critical and must be at the center of our efforts. How does that inclusion look like? Providing sustainable platforms in which youth leadership is grown, intergenerational collaboration, capacity building, and education are some of the actions that may be taken. I believe we cannot afford to sideline our continent's greatest resource. I also hold that cross-sector collaboration is a critical component in our climate action plans. These plans must be co-developed with businesses, subnational government, and other non-state actors to ensure they're fully investable and readily implementable. Today, as we look towards NDC 3.0, there is a unique opportunity for African countries to elevate climate strategies to a higher ambition. Our climate action plans should include adaptation objectives and investments to protect essential sectors, infrastructure, and people from climate-related consequences. Be coherent with the national adaptation planning processes, promote global environmental agreements, and include women, indigenous people, youth, and those most vulnerable to climate change. Our discussions here are not just theoretical. We have a clear mandate to drive and ensure transformational implementation, unlock finance, and integrate climate action with sustainable development goals. We must have a clear vision for the future, protecting people's health and well-being for future generations. I encourage all of us to engage deeply in this exchange of ideas, best practices, and lessons learned from our challenges. It is time to collaborate across borders, sectors, and generations, promoting inclusivity, diversity, and equity. The voices of those affected by climate change need to be heard and respected. Beyond the technical know-how, the path ahead requires a united front and with cross-sector collaboration and inclusion of youth voices to lead the way for a more just, sustainable, and equitable future. In doing so, not only are we tackling climate change, but also upholding fundamental rights. And there, ladies and gentlemen, I conclude my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. And I think we had a quite good inspiration right now. I would like to do one more thing. I would like to thank our colleagues in the background, partly in Bonn, for making this technologically viable. We have, as you know, an online facilitation made possible in no time. So this is something where I think we should work on it. And if you see me, Sophie, and others sometimes on the phone, we are on the background trying to manage, there's no French right now, there's this and so on and so forth. So bear with us. It added a little bit of complexity to the whole thing. I would also like to thank a lot, because they made it possible, our development partners. We have the German Embassy, GIZ, and others here to support the partnership, the UN, and so on and so forth in these efforts. Without the 15 plus development partners, at least supporting the organizations that we have here, this would not be possible. So that is a very important one. A quick round of applause also to that. Thank you so much. And use these days also to think about how you can coordinate on the ground better with your own government people, with the international partners. That's really important. I don't want to be unpolite. We need to do a quick picture with the minister and the partners. We do a big group picture afterwards, but right now, please stay seated, come into the front, my dear partner colleagues, so that we can have a quick group photo, and then we can bid farewell to the Honorable Minister.
Mvua hainyeshi sana, lakini moyo wangu hauwezi kukata tamaa.
Thank you once again, Minister, and please give us the honor of having you around, and then a quick round of applause to you as well. Again, thank you so much for being with us. I'm continuing at high speed, I try at least, and hand over to the scene-setting presentation by Bernd Hackmann from UNFCCC at the headquarters there in Bonn. He will join us online, and I hope the tech is working. Let's keep fingers crossed. And please, Bernd, without further ado, we are keen on hearing from you about the Global Stocktake and the implementation-related work that you are planning to do and the outlook that you can give to us. Let's see whether that works.
Checking whether you can hear me. Is that possible?
You're on screen even. Good morning.
Fantastic. I'm even on screen. Good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for having me and for organizing this. And I can only also applaud everyone who is helping setting this up. In the background, I saw colleagues from the NDC partnership here. Rings under their eyes, setting this all up, making this happen. So thank you so much for, in this very short time, getting everyone up to speed on the virtual side. I saw great participation in Rwanda. I would have been there myself. It would have been fantastic. I can only say or repeat what you mentioned, Romeo. I'm missing the coffee break already now. So looking forward to come back in no time. Also, I heard your hint about record speed. We will have a very short presentation from my end, and then I hand back over to you in the venue to really get into your conversations. I will talk a bit about the first Global Stocktake and also what we are doing or what we are seeing on the implementation side. Before starting, would really like to echo the fantastic words the Minister said earlier on, that there is a massive opportunity for collaboration. There's a massive opportunity for really use this NDC and climate work to kickstart economies and to move forward. But there are also really, really important challenges to be addressed before all this is happening. So let's use these 3 days to address these challenges, and I will kick you off with where we are. This one, PowerPoint, well, should be here. Please let me know if I'm sharing my screen. And you can see it. I assume you can see this and still hear me, because I don't hear any negative reactions, and I'll just go ahead. So just very briefly to set the frame and context for where we are right now, and also why it's so important to have this meeting at this time with all of you, all of the partners, but also all you from all the different countries. It is absolutely critical that we keep moving. What you see here is basically the cycle of the Paris Agreement. It is the whole infrastructure, the architecture that underlies all these climate actions nowadays. We have the goals of the Paris Agreement on mitigation, on adaptation, and on finance flows. And what you see is, and probably also know how it's been done, this is the Paris Agreement acts over time. So it is, we on one hand want to achieve 2 degrees, ideally 1.5 degrees, adapt to these changes, and also make financial flows consistent with climate action that is required. And we call it sometimes the ambition cycle, or just simply the Paris Agreement architecture. So every country puts forward what is called the NDC. And this NDC are the country's actions it wants to implement to achieve these goals. And from then on, we start implementing our activities. We start, and we heard already a lot about this also from Miriam up front, about the transparency of action. So we start reporting on our activities under the enhanced transparency framework. And then every 5 years, we take stock of where we are under the Paris Agreement, where we are vis-a-vis our objectives. And then if we haven't reached our objectives, we do this whole thing again. Go back to the drawing board, we prepare new NDCs. And with that, over time, our collaborative ambition becomes better and better so that we achieve these objectives. So this is in a very short description what the Paris Agreement architecture actually wants us to do, and what everyone signs up to do. As you know, we are currently at a moment where we basically finished our first cycle. So we had our initial NDCs. We had a Global Stocktake that took place last year in Dubai at the COP. And as Miriam also said, we are now in the process, or many of us are in the process, of preparing the first BTRs that are the reporting instruments under the Paris Agreement. So everything has been done once. And let me talk a bit about the Global Stocktake. There was a very comprehensive international decision on what is the state of climate action. I will not even try to summarize it, because ideally you have to look at it yourself. It has to be seen in its totality. But what I try to put down on this slide is really that there is a part on the mitigation part with regards to 1.5 degrees. There's a part on adaptation, needs of implementation, loss and damage, just transition response measures, and a lot on international cooperation. The way this whole decision is built up is it shows on one hand what has been done so far, shows where we are right now, and it gives an idea of what could be done in the future on all these different aspects. And I don't want to pick out one, because, as you know, all of them together in a systemic approach are important to see. What I just want to say is we are not starting from zero. A lot has happened so far, but what we also see in the Global Stocktake outcome, and by now already in our daily lives all over the world is it is not enough. And that is exactly the reason why we need new NDCs. We will share all these slides afterwards, and I also have additional slides in the slide deck to provide more information, but yeah, for the sake also of brevity, I will not read out everything in these slides. I just want to highlight this one slide because I think this is about mitigation aspects, but a similar figure would have also be suitable for adaptation and for finance because it shows several things. What you see here is on mitigation on greenhouse gas emissions, where the NDCs that are currently on the table will take us. And that is the red in the middle, this part that you see there. This is where climate action in all NDCs take us. You see above it a slightly kind of gray area. And this gray area is where the initial INDCs would have taken us. So you see the INDC, we did it the first time preparing these climate plans all together, would have been much less ambitious than the current NDCs. And I think that is in itself fantastic news. It actually means we are getting better all the time. And this is the whole spirit of the Paris Agreement. But now comes the downside, and that's also part of the Global Stocktake, for us to achieve the objectives of the Paris Agreement, the 1.5 and 2 degrees scenarios, but also for adaptation, of course, the increased resilience and for finance, the financial flows that are necessary for this. To really achieve these objectives, we are by far not there. So for 1.5 and 2 degree scenarios, you see the emission levels that are necessary in the blue or green lines below, and you see the red line where we would be heading if everything is implemented. This is the reason why new NDCs have to be prepared. We are not where we need to be. We are not yet on track to achieve the objectives of the Paris. What is also part of this slide, but not really visible, but I think it's very important, especially also in the context of many African countries, is that we are also not even on track to implement the red part of these NDCs. So a lot is happening, and you know yourself, a lot in each country is happening. Each one of you is working tirelessly to make it happen, but our current NDCs are not 100% being implemented. That's also one of the key outcomes of the UNEP gap report of our colleagues over there, having similar findings. That means we also need to speed up on the implementation side, not only on the ambition side. And I think that is absolutely important to have really meaningful. They need to build on real action on the ground. And I think a lot of the conversations in the coming 3 days is going in that direction. I will skip over the next 1, 2, 3 slides almost. I will leave them in the deck for you for further information. It summarizes a bit what happened. And here is what is really the outcome of the NDCs. A lot we heard already from the previous speakers. I will not talk you through all these slides, but basically highlight the key takeaways that also came out of the Global Stocktake. The key takeaway is a lot has happened, but this is by far not enough. And we need new NDCs to really address these gaps at all different fronts. And these new NDCs ideally are then economy-wide. They are aligned with global warming, limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. This is important because this is the objective of the Paris Agreement. And as we heard before, they are due next year, officially as per this decision, 10th of February next year. And yeah, there's further guidance in here, but I think it is more important if we talk about what these NDCs need to achieve, because they are not just there to tick a box and say, oh, we did our part. They are actually a massive opportunity. And the Honourable Minister mentioned it. It's an opportunity for innovation, for collaboration, and also for really setting whole economies and societies on a climate neutral, on a development pathway that creates, on one hand, prosperity for everyone, but on the other hand, also reduces emissions, driving resilience, and make it work in both ways. We had an exercise here based on the previous NDCs, the previous round of NDCs, but also on the insights from many of our cooperating partners. Most of them, or many of them, are also currently with you in Rwanda, as I could see from the picture that was just been taken. And then also based on a lot of conversations that we inside the Secretariat with our RCCs, our regional collaboration centers, have with parties on the ground about what do we need these NDCs to do. They're not an exercise to do, to just tick a box and submit something for the sake of doing it, but to make them count. And also this slide, I think you will hear a lot about the different aspects over the next 3 days, but to really walk you, or to briefly walk you through it, it is on one hand, of course, NDCs are part of this climate process. They need to follow up on the GST. We need to address the temperature goals, so that means they need to be 1.5 aligned. They need to build and consider the building up of resilience to a warming future, because we need to keep in mind that even if we manage to reduce our emissions to be aligned with 1.5 degrees, we still need to adapt our societies, our economies, to a future of 1.5 degrees, because we're not even there. So 1.5 degrees means it is still getting warmer around the world, and we still need to increase our adaptation action. We need to ensure that these transitions are just, equitable, and leave no one behind. And for that, NDCs really, and I'm glad also Madam Minister spoke to that, need to unlock ambition of finance. So that means that NDCs need to become implementable. And Miriam mentioned that. We will talk a lot of this about this in the next coming days, but implementation means really, they're not just on paper, but they are really integrated international policies. They're integrated with national stakeholders who are doing the action on the ground. And through these, this integration and being implementation ready, and through this ownership, they need to unlock the finance from private investors, but also public finance from donors, from supporters, to really implement these NDCs. So it is important for the next round of NDCs to think through what you put on paper, starting off from how do we implement it? What is needed to implement it? And lastly, of course, they need to be technically sound, because there's a whole follow-up on it, which is on one hand the whole tracking of NDCs, where you need to provide this data, but they also need to be built on numbers, on proper data and information, so that also, for example, carbon markets can really become an integral part of NDCs. With that, and very briefly, we will just look into a very broad overview of the challenges that we in the Secretariat have seen when working with countries around the world in developing and implementing the last round of NDCs. And what I am going to show now is a summary that kindly our regional collaboration centers provided also, of those challenges specifically seen in many African countries. But when looking at these challenges and looking at these barriers that are existing, I can assure you that this is not just happening on the continent, it is happening around the world, because engaging and now entering into this space of developing ambitious climate action that is useful at all levels of society and integrates so many stakeholders is a key challenge that countries all over the world are entering for the first time in many cases, and therefore is something that resonates around the world in all regions that we have. So on the technical and capacity challenges side, there is limited technical expertise for building up these NDCs so that they are not just words on paper, but also resonate with reality. There is often insufficient data collection systems because these NDCs and the targets and the actions often need to be built on solid information and data, and there is simply a lack of getting this data right now because much of this is unknown processes. Lack of tools for accurate emission inventories and projections. That is because it's new. Many countries have started this process with the biannual update reports before, but now also starting with the BTRs, but still the tools to really assess data on GHG emissions are often not available or not properly implemented. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Challenges of setting realistic targets. We see this all over the world because now there needs to be a connection between what is there on paper and what is happening in reality and what is possible in reality, and difficulty of integrating adaptation, mitigation, but also development strategies so that we are not approaching NDCs in a siloed approach, but actually with a holistic, with a programmatic approach, as the Minister mentioned earlier as well. This is the elephant in the room, financial challenges, and I think also here, the next coming days will address these topics. There is, around the world, not only in African countries, insufficient financial resources available for the preparation of NDCs, and even more so for the implementation of NDCs. Often, countries face challenges between balancing economic development with climate action, and therefore, again, it is critical not to have one or the other, but to start thinking them together. How can we develop economically? How can we create prosperity, which on the other hand also helps us achieving the Paris Agreement goals? It's often difficult to bring the right stakeholders all together, in particular when it comes to investors and investment community, because often NDCs are done by environmental ministries with limited access to these stakeholders. And to make this attractive, we also heard from the minister that Rwanda is pooling different projects together to make it more interesting. And therefore NDCs have to be thought also from that angle. How can we make our action attractive to financiers, to the financial sector? And of course, aligning NDCs with national development plans. This is, again, often caused by a siloed approach, by the difficult access to planning, to economic actors. So also here we see difficulties in many countries, and I think this is nothing new for you in your daily life. And addressing these challenges and talking about those success stories is one of the key priorities for the next coming days. And then lastly, as you all know, institutional challenges. And there we see in many countries around the world and also on the continent, weak institutional frameworks for climate governance. As climate governance, as we discussed before, has to be much more integrated into the activities of broader planning, of development, and economic actors. Limited interministerial coordination, similar to that, is kind of who is in charge of all this if we want to address everything. So a systemic approach, as mentioned earlier, building this out in an environment where to have specific resorts doing specific things is very challenging, and I'm glad we are hearing about this in the coming days. Legal regulatory frameworks, of course, these are the teeth that actually make climate action work. How do I turn these ideas into concrete policies, into concrete actions that are followed by stakeholders in the country? And last but not least, the difficulties of harmonizing NDCs with local action and initiatives so that we have a macro view on our NDCs, even broader when you look at the United Nations and the Paris Agreement targets globally. How does the and regional level linked to this? How do the actions actually link up? How do we ensure that what is happening on the ground finds its way into the NDC and vice versa? With that, I'm coming to the end of these slides. So thank you very much for having me. And I like to end always with this quote: "The time for next NDCs is now." And I'm glad that we have such strong support in Rwanda to make this happen and to have this very, very important conversation and meetings over the coming next days. With that, Romeo, over to you.
So I think that again, after the inspiration that we got, we are now grounded in the challenge ahead of us, and I think we should, again, without further ado, go to the panel discussion, which will deal with the evaluation of current NDCs and looking back to move forward is the motto there. And I would like to ask our panelists that are in the room, Ms. Davina Milenge Uwela from African Development Bank, to the front. Davina, good to have you here. As well as Mr. Do Etienne Traoré. Traoré, tu es où? Là-bas. mon ami burkinabé. Voilà. And then we have Monsieur Ange Benjamin Brida de Côte d'Ivoire. Please join us on the stage. There he is. It's such a big room, it's great. We have about 115, 120 people in the room, so great turnout. Thank you very much for being here. And online, last not least, we have Ms. Elena Ruiz Abril from UN Women, who brings in a gender perspective, I guess. And as the moderator of this panel, I would like to invite Jérôme to come to the front. And with that, I hand over to Jérôme. Have fun and have good elaborations. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everybody. Bonjour. And I will stop here in terms of languages, although I could say I say bonjour, but no longer than that. I'm very pleased to be here, and actually I'm taking over a colleague from UNDP, Martin Raab, who was to come today, and I hope we're going to give justice to his preparation. So, and I will, if you don't mind, colleagues on my left, I will call you with your first name. It's easier maybe for us. Okay, it's good. Working with UNEP and on a project that Miriam had mentioned before, which is the NDC Action Project funded by the International Climate Initiative, implemented in 10 partner countries with direct support to those countries. But not only that, we have also a regional exchange element in this project, which we did not use so much during the COVID period. So that's why we are here, and we could bring some of the resources for making this forum take place with our contribution. In the Africa continent, we have 3 countries that we directly support, which are Ghana, Uganda, and Morocco. With this small introduction, let me go to the gist of this panel discussion. This panel discussion, you want to take this as a sort of, I would say, sense setting for the breakout group discussion we have later today. We have, as Romeo indicated, we have 3 consecutive sessions. We will give you the details of how this will work, but basically you are pre-assigned to 3 groups, and you will be staying throughout the 3 sessions in the same room, while the facilitating team of the 3 topics will come consecutively to your room to facilitate the discussion or to introduce the topic and let you have the discussion among yourself. One of the room will be for the, in the interest of the people who are online, one of the room will be this one, actually. That will be a hybrid format with a mix of in-person participation and those people who were invited who did not travel in the end, and that will be online, they will be able to interact with you. But I'm not going into more details on that. We go that later, and you will be helped by colleagues from the organization to go to the respective room. For now, let's see what we have learned collectively, or what you have learned collectively in Africa context about the last NDC revision process, the challenges, the good lessons, to sort of put the landscape for the discussion later on. So I would say that just to give an overview, and I just would read the paragraph we have prepared for that a critical starting point for the development of new NDCs is to reflect on the previous cycle, the progress made, and the wider policy and action landscape that you have each in your country. In this discussion, countries and development partners will reflect on the previous round of the NDCs or the NDCs, and will share the experience of developing NDCs or supporting their development in one form or the other, supporting or developing or doing the implementation, and the potential enablers for increasing ambition in the next round of NDCs. So what we want to learn from the past, and we want to bring these lessons in the future, in our current task. So I will invite you, colleagues, to elaborate on what has worked well, while also pointing to gaps that you may have come across, challenges, and the opportunities. So this was sort of like giving a bit of a sense setting for the rest of the day. So we're going to be collecting your perspective on your past experience with previous round of revisions, the progress made, and then looking at next year's submission, and looking at which areas you have in mind to prioritize, to raise ambition, and which processes you think to put in place to make sure the ambition will materialize. So maybe I will turn to my colleague to the left. So I think you are Etienne, right? Etienne is there. No, Etienne is here, okay. And we start with the countries, if it's okay, Davina, and then we can reflect on the perspective from the supporting organization like AFDB in Africa, how you have seen this process developing in the continent. So maybe Etienne, if you don't mind, by the way, on peut parler aussi en français, puisqu'on a la traduction et l'interprétation simultanée. On va faire ça, si vous voulez. Donc l'idée, c'est de regarder un petit peu comment vous, par rapport, premièrement, ce qui a bien marché durant le cycle précédent pour la révision, ce qui a peut-être été des défis que vous avez eu du mal à relever ou bien que vous avez relevé. Ce serait très intéressant d'avoir cette perspective. Et on va d'abord commencer par ça. Regardez un petit peu en arrière et on fera la même chose avec vous, Ben.
D'accord, merci beaucoup. Et bonjour à tout le monde. Ok, c'est un plaisir pour moi de participer à cette discussion qui est très importante pour les prochains cycles des CDN. Il faut se dire que la CDN en cours au Burkina, ce qui a beaucoup marché, c'est notre approche participative et inclusive, voilà, qui a mobilisé l'ensemble des acteurs, que ce soit les acteurs étatiques et les acteurs non étatiques, que ce soit au niveau central, au niveau déconcentré, même au niveau des collectivités. Parce qu'on a plein d'actions, voilà, qui sont menées dans tous ces espaces et qui sont très importants pour la CDN. Et aussi, ce qui a marché également chez nous, c'est que nous avons pu bénéficier de beaucoup d'accompagnement de partenaires différents, plus de 5 partenaires qui nous accompagnaient. Et nous avons créé un genre de concertation périodique avec ces acteurs, voilà, pour faciliter leur intervention. Et chaque 3 mois, voilà, on a une réunion avec les partenaires, voilà, pour voir les progrès que nous sommes en train d'accomplir et les difficultés, voilà, auxquelles nous faisons face. Et à ce jour, nous avons organisé 3 réunions des partenaires techniques et financiers et qui interviennent au niveau de la CDN du Burkina. Et les difficultés, comme vous le savez tous, c'est la question de mobilisation des ressources, parce que nous avons 2 volets, le volet conditionnel et le volet inconditionnel. Pour ce qui concerne le volet inconditionnel, on n'a pas suffisamment de problèmes à ce niveau. Mais sur le volet conditionnel, où la mobilisation, comparativement à la CDN dernière, c'est vrai qu'elle est à hausse, parce que si on compare le volet conditionnel de la première CDN à l'évaluation, on était à moins de 30%. Mais à ce jour, nous sommes à environ 56%, voilà, de mobilisation du taux des efforts conditionnels. Donc si on compare les deux, ça veut dire qu'on a fait un progrès. Et cela est lié au fait qu'on a pu instaurer cette concertation avec les partenaires techniques et financiers. Et aussi, ce qui a aussi marqué, c'est qu'on a pu intégrer les aspects genre. Voilà, les aspects genre ont été suffisamment pris en compte dans notre CDN. Et aussi, nous avons développé une stratégie aussi de communication autour de cela, parce que quand on compare avec la première CDN, ce qui a beaucoup manqué, c'était la vulgarisation, la communication autour de ça. Donc je vais m'arrêter là, voilà, par rapport à cette première question, et je pense que je pourrai revenir sur d'autres aspects. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Étienne, c'est très intéressant. Et je crois que cet aspect de l'implication des collectivités territoriales est évidemment un facteur clé. Peut-être trop souvent, ce qu'on a observé au tout début, c'est que c'était des plans nationaux et qui méritaient d'être, on va dire, ramenés au niveau territorial pour pouvoir réellement mettre mis en œuvre. Merci pour vos remarques et toutes les autres que vous avez faites. Je vais me diriger maintenant vers Ange, Benjamin, s'il vous plaît. Les mêmes questions en gros, pour savoir un petit peu qu'est-ce qui a marché, moins marché, qu'est-ce que vous pouvez nous partager avec nous.
Merci, thank you, Jerome. I'm going to keep in French. Just my Anglophone colleague, you can keep your headset. And to please my Francophone friends here who always complain when I give the address in English. Alors, parlons des CDN au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire. Il faut dire que pour la dernière version des CDN de la Côte d'Ivoire, le pays a affiché une ambition très forte avec 30% de réduction de ses émissions à l'horizon 2030 qui correspondent environ à 37 millions de tonnes équivalent CO2 à réduire, qui concernent vraiment pratiquement tous les secteurs de l'économie. Et arriver avec une telle CDN, avec une forte ambition, cela nécessitait beaucoup de collaboration, d'engagement. Et je pense que ça a été l'une des réussites du processus d'élaboration des CDN en Côte d'Ivoire. L'implication, l'engagement avec toutes les parties prenantes à tous les niveaux, à commencer par le développement de la première version avec les NDCs et ensuite la deuxième version. Cet engagement-là a été très fort. C'est vrai que on a bénéficié de tout l'engouement qu'il y avait autour de la question climatique et de l'adoption de l'accord de Paris. Mais je pense maintenir cet engagement avec les parties prenantes, ça a été une très forte réussite pour les CDN au niveau de la Côte d'Ivoire. Un tel niveau d'engagement arrive aussi avec des défis énormes. Et l'un des premiers défis que nous avons eu à relever durant cette CDN, c'était justement le développement d'une base analytique solide pour soutenir ces échanges avec les parties prenantes. Parce que faut reconnaître, comme ça a été présenté ici, que certains domaines ont besoin d'un travail analytique assez soutenu. Par exemple, l'une des difficultés que nous avions eues avec le secteur de l'énergie, pour la première version des CDN, c'était véritablement que l'analyse qui avait été faite ne permettait pas, disons, un engagement suffisamment intéressant avec le secteur de l'énergie, au point de leur permettre de prendre un certain nombre de décisions fortes, notamment sortie du charbon qui était déjà planifié. Et du coup, on a eu du mal à proposer des alternatives parce que justement, il y avait ces difficultés en termes d'analyse. Pour la deuxième CDN, je pense qu'avec l'appui avec l'appui des partenaires tels que la GIZ, le NDC Partnership, CCSI, on a pu surmonter cette difficulté-là au niveau du secteur de l'énergie. Et je pense que ça a été vraiment l'un des défis énormes qui persiste aussi aujourd'hui pour d'autres secteurs et pour d'autres aspects de l'analyse. Je pense, deuxième défi, et je vais m'arrêter là, c'est un peu au niveau de la coordination d'un tel processus qui touche plusieurs secteurs avec des intérêts et des priorités parfois différentes. Vous avez le secteur de l'agriculture au niveau national qui a pour ambition d'assurer l'autosuffisance alimentaire, le secteur de l'énergie, d'assurer la sécurité énergétique. Et donc, comment concilier tous ces aspects-là, tant au niveau politique, mais aussi au niveau technique. Donc, en termes de coordination, c'était un défi majeur pour nous. Voilà, je vais peut-être m'arrêter là pour ce point-là.
Merci Ben, c'est très intéressant notre première approche, de toute façon d'avoir déjà ces réflexions. Ce qu'on va peut-être essayer de faire, c'est d'inviter notre collègue qui est en ligne. Je vois que Elena est en ligne. Elena Ruiz Abril travaille avec UN Women et peut-être qu'elle peut, puisque ça a été légèrement évoqué au niveau de l'implication de toutes les parties prenantes, et une des parties prenantes qui est essentielle, c'est ce qui représente plus de la moitié de la population, ou un petit peu plus de la moitié de la population, pour être vraiment engagé, pour pouvoir permettre que ce qui est décidé, on va dire, au niveau gouvernemental, puisse avoir une traduction concrète sur le terrain. Donc peut-être que je vais laisser la parole à Madame Elena Ruiz. Je ne sais pas, I'm not sure, Elena, if you are getting the translation in English, or if you are fluent in French. So maybe I switch to English, right? Or is it okay for you? We cannot hear Elena. Just hold for a second, let's see. Do you want to try again to see if we can hear you?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you. So I was asking if it's okay, or should I repeat the question, or is it fine?
No, it's fine. Thank you.
So maybe, yeah, what we like to hear is how you have managed, or you have been you've seen how the women and other groups of the population have been involved in this process so far, without necessarily naming any specific country, but just to give a sort of overview on the situation in Africa, and so we can identify possible gaps for the way forward in this particular, I would say, aspect. Thank you. Excellent. Over to you, Elena.
Thank you, Jérôme. So my name is Elena Ruiz. I'm UN Women's Regional Policy Advisor for West and Central Africa on issues related to women's economic empowerment, and that comprise climate change. So the analysis that we've been doing in the region, not only in West and Central Africa, for the whole of Sub-Saharan Africa, of the NDCs and how they have integrated gender, I mean, what we see is that we are in a dynamic of progress. It's a good trend. I mean, when you compare the second round of NDCs from 21 to 24 to the previous one, you can see the difference just by looking at the documents themselves. For the first round, there were hardly any references to gender, and when they were, it was all about how women were the vulnerable group. Now, what we see, I mean, as we've moved forward 10 years after the Paris Agreement, there is much more understanding of the role that women play in climate change mitigation and adaptation across the different sectors, and you can see that reflected in the NDCs already. I mean, at the level of analysis, huge change. I mean, now women are considered as a cross-cutting, articulating actor across the different sectors, and there is a lot of information on the impact of climate change on women. What we are still missing is the next step. So we are very good on the analysis, but not so good on what to do next and how to really engage women as agents of change for climate change mitigation and adaptation with specific recommendations, actions, KPIs linked to gender. I mean, there are some NDCs that do that, but that's a small part. There is no link to budget either. You might say that you want to do something, actions targeting women specifically, but not necessarily linked to budget. But still, I mean, there are some good practices. There are some countries, like, I mean, I can think of just a few. I mean, Cabo Verde, South Sudan, the same Burkina Faso, who is in the panel today, that they've really done a good job in terms of integrating gender across the different elements of the NDC. The real gap then lies on implementation, right? So as we've said before, this is not about getting the document right, but about action on the ground. And there, what we see is that when there are actions targeting women, most of them have to do with capacity building. Most of them focus on building skills, training, and it's not the type of transformational action that is going to change things. It's not the type of measure that is going to make sure that women really can benefit of the opportunities brought by the green economy, can access green jobs or green finance. So that's something that it's important to reflect on and think about how to change going forward. I think for now I can stop there, and when we look at the future, I can give you a few ideas of areas which are more critical in terms of getting us there and having an impact. Over to you, Jerome.
Thank you very much, Elena. I think in the interest of time, we're going to have to be very concise in the next remarks. And again, it's a sort of appetizer, if you want to take it this way, for the further in-depth discussions during the rounds of breakout groups. So don't worry too much if we only touch the surface. Maybe I'm turning to you, Davina, and maybe you can share your perspective, a bit of the same, I would say, a broader overview on Africa in general and see what you've observed. Also noting that the African Development Bank is hosting the Africa NDC forum. But now, yes. Okay, over to you, Davina.
Well, thanks. And indeed, as the African Development Bank, we're very pleased to be here. We've been to Rwanda several times on climate issues. As my colleague and friend Miriam indicated, we were here in 2016 for when we still had the carbon forums. So on the NDCs, there is, she just mentioned, progress since the last ones. And as I really appreciate the attention that has been given to the NDC 3, of course coming from what was the outcome of the stocktake, that we see the NDC, the UNFCCC come up with very concrete actions and bringing on partners really early to guide countries on what needs to be in the NDCs. You've seen that bring attention to the NDCP Navigator tool that I think we'll hear more about. You've seen the platform being raised on the UN NDC Promise 2025, in rallying really all our partners together to spotlight the gaps. 48 countries have submitted their NDCs. We have LTSs that are also there. We have NAPs that are in there. We've talked a lot about BTRs. All these, when you put them together, you're able to judge that this continent is really dedicated on addressing the climate challenge. So what are the gaps? The gaps we've talked about is finance. So I guess over the 3 years, we're going to talk of how do we move the needle on finance. There's finance, there's pockets of finance, and as you mentioned, we don't really have much time, but I could draw a trajectory where we were at COP21 and where we are to date. The minister talked about the issuance of the sustainability bonds. That's a journey that has been traveled. She talked of the IREME facility that they have. That is the journey that has been traveled. And as a development bank, the only resident multilateral development bank here, we see that we've aligned our investments to that. At COP21, our commitment was at 21% of our investment portfolio. To date, it is tipping 50 plus. Because of that pressure, you know, Africa, you might not know, for those that are outside this continent, it has a AU Heads of State committee on climate change, first of its kind. And this was back in 2009 when it was formed. So there has been deep engagement on climate issues. And so when we see countries engaged on NDCs, it is because there's political will. So we underline that there is political will. We need, she mentioned, implementation. We have the documents. They've been improved from the first ones. Now, she's mentioning issues around budgeting. Let's get into those nitty-gritties. What is missing? Sector reports. He mentioned analytics. That is very deep. We are looking at taxonomies, because the $3 trillion gap on NDC is going to be met. 75% of that is coming from the private sector. How do we crowd in the private sector? We crowd it in. The one thing that scares the private sector is greenwashing. How do you deal with greenwashing? You bring in the right standards, the right taxonomies of defining what the climate benefit is, and they will see the opportunity. So we're working around metrics. We are working around rallying the private sector. We have initiatives such as the green banks. The REME facility that was mentioned is part of those. We're working with them in BNI, in Abidjan. We're working with the bank in Benin and several others to try and create portfolio, because ultimately portfolio matters. We'll move the needle on these nice documents if ultimately we have green capital flowing on the businesses that are in the markets to date. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I think we are jumping in directly into the meat of the discussions that will be super important. It's very nice that you made those remarks. Again, we are running a bit late, so I would not take too much time. I would maybe this time around invite our two colleagues from the countries to share their views on how they see the sectors or the areas where you're going to be focusing more for raising the ambition. And if you have a bit of time, what you would think you would do best for this time around, or better, I would say, not best, better for preparing the implementation. So that would be the two questions. Private sector, definitely something we heard before with the minister. Rwanda has a very nice, apparently a nice platform. We're going to hear about during this forum how to engage the private sector in the process from developing, but also for implementation. And oftentimes what we see, or what we've noticed, is that with private sector and the finance sector as well, we need to change a bit our narrative and to be more focusing on what are the economic benefits, because in the end, private sector will benefit to take climate action. They do not necessarily see that in the short term, but overall on the longer term, and that's a link with the long-term strategies, they will benefit. So that's super important. But this can be still a bit of a challenge to get them fully on board. But without going into further in this topic, because I'm sort of going out of my role of facilitator, I will just turn to Etienne to comment on some of the key areas that Burkina might be looking at as a priority for the next round. And same with Ben for Côte d'Ivoire, and see what you have in mind for the next areas for raising ambition, and possibly what would you do better, quote unquote, this time around. Over to you, Etienne, first.
D'accord, merci beaucoup. Très rapidement pour ce qui concerne le Burkina. Comme vous le savez, c'est le secteur Afoulou qui occupe une place importante non seulement dans l'économie, mais aussi sur le plan des émissions de gaz à effet de serre. Ce secteur, à lui seul, émet environ 90% de nos émissions, voilà, selon les derniers inventaires de gaz à effet de serre. Et également, c'est le pilier de notre économie. Donc, face à ce challenge, avec l'avènement des stratégies, avec l'avènement de l'élaboration des stratégies de développement bas carbone, nous avons essayé de développer voilà, des stratégies, voilà, pour non seulement accroître notre productivité, tout en réduisant les émissions de gaz à effet de serre. Tout récemment, on a lancé une initiative qu'on appelle l'offensive agricole. Ça permet de produire, voilà, pour les populations et aussi d'utiliser, voilà, des outils moins polluants, voilà, pour permettre de concilier lutte contre le changement climatique et développement. Donc c'est ce secteur où on aura beaucoup de focus. C'est vrai que aussi le deuxième secteur, c'est l'énergie, qui occupe moins de 5% de nos émissions. Et nous sommes aussi dans un processus de développement des énergies renouvelables, voilà, pour permettre voilà, de rehausser nos ambitions et aussi de produire voilà, de l'électricité propre, voilà, pour l'économie aussi du Burkina Faso. Voici très rapidement, voilà, ce que je voulais dire par rapport à cette deuxième question.
Merci beaucoup, Étienne. Oui, on va essayer de clore dans moins de 10 minutes, donc c'est pour ça que... Mais merci pour votre collaboration. Même question pour Ben, donc du coup.
Merci Jérôme. Pour la Côte d'Ivoire, je pense que en termes de priorité, des domaines prioritaires pour le prochain rang des CDN, il y a d'abord l'aspect du renforcement des inventaires. C'est vrai que nous avons fait de très bons progrès sur cet aspect-là. Nous avons une CDN qui couvre une large gamme de gaz considérés, y compris le méthane et même les polluants climatiques de courte durée de vie dans nos CDN. Mais il s'agira pour le prochain rang des CDN de regarder certains secteurs où il y a eu de nouveaux développements, par exemple le secteur pétrole et gaz, où il y a eu de nouvelles découvertes et ce sont des éléments qui doivent être ajoutés, pris en considération dans la CDN. On a aussi le secteur de la foresterie qui est reflété dans la CDN, mais qui a un inventaire des niveaux 1 et vous savez un peu toute la complexité des émissions au niveau de ce secteur foresterie et des terres. Donc il y a besoin aussi d'être révisité et renforcé. Donc ça, c'est pour ce qui concerne les aspects liés aux émissions, aux inventaires. Après, pour les aspects transversaux, je pense qu'on en a parlé beaucoup. L'aspect mise en œuvre, donc plan de mise en œuvre, plan d'investissement au niveau de notre CDN. Donc du coup, c'est l'un des domaines prioritaires où, comme ça a été mentionné par la BRAD, nous avons véritablement besoin de créer une sorte de portfolio avec des projets qui sont bien chiffrés, mais surtout l'alignement avec le plan national de développement, qui est l'un des domaines de travail assez important pour le prochain cycle des CDN.
Merci beaucoup. Je crois que c'est un nouveau... Vous avez touché un point qui va revenir souvent dans nos discussions, comment les CDN peuvent devenir quelque chose réellement qui soit finalement un sous-produit de votre propre plan de développement, qui soit décliné à tous les niveaux. Je crois que c'est ça le plus important. La CDN est vous avez un rendez-vous tous les 5 ans pour vous informer les autres parties à la Convention quels sont vos objectifs. Mais je crois que le plus important, c'est que ce soit un document qui serve comme une blueprint, comme un schéma directeur pour votre développement, la prospérité économique, etc. Donc je crois que c'est un point très, très intéressant. Je vais peut-être inviter Elena, si Elena veut faire quelques remarques sur comment elle voit les choses à l'avenir, et puis peut-être conclure très rapidement avec Davina. Merci. Elena, c'est à vous.
Merci beaucoup, Jérôme. Très rapide, very quickly, if we had to prioritize one thing in terms of working in an area that is going to really give us impact, is access to green finance for women. And I know, I mean, I could say a lot of things, but because I have very little time, that's my message today. I mean, and this is probably one of the most unused dimensions of this just transition. Tremendous growth on green finance, but women are not getting access to it. And it's a matter of justice, but it's also a matter of efficiency. I mean, we are saying that we need to accelerate the fight against climate change. We cannot do that if we don't give the tool as Jerome said, to half of the population. And there are fantastic initiatives already going on in this area, in the region. I mean, the colleague from the African Development Bank mentioned taxonomies. A number of countries are doing green taxonomies right now. It's an opportunity to include also gender KPIs, so that we send a message to investors saying you can also have a social impact, an equality impact when you do your investments in the green economy. There is also a need to rethink a little bit how the whole green finance architecture works. I mean, carbon credit markets are a fantastic source of finance to support climate action, but it's impossible for grassroots women or for women-led businesses which are at the forefront of the climate action to access those mechanisms. And those mechanisms tend to somehow reproduce other types of inequalities. And then working with the private sector, working helping get banks adapt their financial products so that more women that are working or would like to expand their businesses in the green economy can do that. A number of countries have national funds for green transition. Let's make sure that we include some KPIs there, and let's leverage gender responsive budgeting and green budgeting together to make sure that we align the climate priorities with the employment and equality priorities of countries on the ground. So if I had to say one thing, let's focus on getting that green finance right so that women-led businesses, grassroots women can access it. Over to you, Jerome.
Elena, and now just going to give you the closing words for you, very short. Davina, please.
Thanks. Maybe building on to what Elena has said, making green finance work. One, I think she's emphasizing something called inclusion. How do we build the base up? And traditionally, we have not, as development banks, really focused on inclusion, building from the base up. But we realize as a continent that has the highest population going into 2050, one, there's a market opportunity. Two, there is a labor dividend. So we need to focus on those to create the right skills, the right reskilling, given the state of the climate today and nature. So we really need to focus as the African continent on the opportunities we have. We have critical minerals. 30% of the minerals required are on this continent. We have arable land. 65% of the remaining global arable land is on this continent. But on the flip side, Africa's arable land or land degradation is at 60%. So those are some of the things that we really need to quickly address. So in the nexus of critical green transitional minerals, we need to do something there. Two, we need to do something about the youth and women dividend. Three, we need to do something on nature. And this being a forum that I really would have wished that we have an Africa Climate Week this year, going into Baku as we did last year. But this could stand in that gap, that we come up with very concrete actions going into Baku. As you know, Baku has two things, the BTORs, and it also has the new collective quantifiable goal on climate. So if we could outline what Elena said, what these gentlemen have said on what they're doing. He mentioned what Burkina Faso is doing on their unconditional contributions. I think he mentioned 56. That is a huge number to leverage. And so what we are doing as the African Development Bank, since one, we have with the UK government a guarantee scheme, 2 billion guarantee scheme for green pipeline. So indeed, if we could use those resources to show the opportunity, oftentimes the challenge is we don't have ready projects, and this is always a frustrating bit. We have a lot of opportunity, but we don't have well-detailed, analytical, analyzed, and bankable project that can be presented to capital owners. So that is the work that we need to do. How do we blend finance? Who are the financiers in this? So when we hear things like sustainability goals, then we know there is an opportunity. How do we leverage that? How do we finance small businesses? On the circular economy, sorry, let me just give examples so that when we do breakout sessions, we then can identify opportunities that we are taking into Baku for the capital owners to take on. One, startups for youth. So on circular economy, we've started incubation hubs for startup youth. And one of them is actually here with the Impact Hub. So we have in the city of Kigali, in the city of Abidjan, and in Accra, Ghana, to start to work with these businesses that are already on the market. These are not ideas. These are people already on the market, but they need that scale up. And how does the African Development Bank handhold this? And that's what we intersect with IREME and those kind of facilities to kind of resource those pockets of finance in channel finance to the way that it reaches the target portfolio for Elena's team, the youth. And what we are also doing is to ensure that when we invest, we have trackers, we have a gender marker in our investment. You cannot take a project without taking your gender marker. We are doing the same for youth. We're doing the same for climate. So that is work that is already traveled. It's not enough, but there is good traction that we can build on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I would just also add one thing is that you also want, and you already do work with commercial banks. And here I was stunned to see the EcoBank, the Pan-African Bank, is also in this country, it's in Senegal, it's in headquarters in Togo and in many other countries. And this is also quite interesting because they are seeing their interest in their business to work on climate projects. So this is something that is also promising, but still, we need to change the narrative when we talk to the financial sectors so they understand better what they can gain from this engagement. Over to you, Romeo, and we're going to give a round of applause to our panelists, maybe. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ben, Davina, Elena, and Ben and Etienne, and of course Jérôme for the moderation here. We are changing a little bit the program, and I know you all are ready for a coffee break, but I want to keep the dynamic, and we also have to stick with our interpreters. So I would like to ask my dear colleague Gloria Namazzi from the NDC Partnership Support Unit, my colleague who sits opposite to me in the office in Bonn, to come to the front and talk us through in maximum 10 to 15 minutes the NDC Navigator 3.0, a tool that we've developed all together to guide you towards the new NDCs. And let me just hand over to you, Gloria.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Romeo. As I wait for the presentation to come, I just want to convey my greetings to everyone. So happy to see everyone, very many familiar faces. Yeah, and I guess it gets to speak to the importance of the topic today. As Romeo introduced me, I'm Gloria Namazzi from the NDC Partnership. I support several countries that are here, but among which is Rwanda, Uganda, Liberia, and Ethiopia. I'm happy to see all of you. Yeah. So to start us off, the presentation will focus on the NDC Navigator that was developed this June together with UNDP, UNFCCC, WRI, and Ricardo Consulting, with contributions from other partners that are present here. And so, sorry, sometimes the technology fails. Next, Sophie, thank you. The next one? Yeah, so the NDC Navigator, as I said, was developed this June as a collaboration between UNFCCC, UNDP, WRI, and Ricardo. And the main objective was to help support countries. Of course, you might know, as countries undertake this process, they are experiencing a lot of challenges on how to do the whole process. So the Navigator was supposed to avail information in one tool so that as countries reflect back on what they've done in the previous NDC and the stocktake and how they move forward, they have a resource that is available to guide them on several aspects of the NDC. As I said, the tool is interactive and has a group of guiding questions that whoever the user can go through and discover the route that they can take. Sophie, next, please. Oh, okay, thank you. So the Navigator has 3 sections. One is on Learn, and another on Reflect, and the last one on Explore. I will describe each in detail here. And so the first section on Learn is really looking at the importance of NDCs and why update the NDCs. And here what we want to do is to really focus on how the update of the NDC can bring about transformational change, but also how do we bring on board the social and economic benefits, and how do we use the NDC update to unlock finance, while at the same time supporting other policy objectives, and really be the basis for a strong NDC update as we undertake the NDC 3.0 update. And the next section on Reflect, this is really where countries take a stocktake on what has happened in the previous NDC, what progress has been made, where are the gaps, where any lessons learned, and how can they take these lessons and learned into the new NDC 3.0. And here we note that countries have different pathways on how to update their NDC 3.0, but a starting point would be to really reflect. How was the implementation of the previous NDC done? Were all groups of society included? Any that were left out, how do we bring them on board? What sectors are doing well, what sectors are not doing well? How do we bring on board new sectors? And in this section of Reflect, we have a set of guiding questions that really bring to the fore these questions on how does a country progress given the progress that was made. And here, based on the country needs and priorities, the guiding questions help the user to identify any opportunities that are appropriate for the country, but also build on previous experience and bring on board the national priorities to move the process forward. Yeah. And in the Explore section, here is where we have the 7 routes and opportunities. On your left, the 3 really look into how countries can bring on board the global stocktake and raise ambition. So how a country is going to align their NDC 3.0 to the Paris Agreement temperature goal. How do they bring on the global goal on adaptation, but also how do they deliver a just and equitable transition? And this is really mostly to stocktake and reflect. And then on your left, the other 4, it's looking at how to enhance NDC implementation. How do we mobilize all of government, all of society to engage, but also how do we identify the needs, and how do we as countries bring on board technically sound and very transparent documents? And also, how do we ensure that as countries we unlock finance? And here, the essence is that each of these routes has guiding questions that can further help you define in detail what option the country can consider and what route the country can go through. So this graphic just summarizes how the whole tool works. So the guiding questions help the country define the routes it will take, and within the routes, the opportunities, for example, that may be sector specific, but also as you explore the opportunities, you can get examples of case studies and best practices, and also any other further support that you would want to use to further refine your opportunities for the NDC. Here I will give an example of one route, which is to align, on alignment with the Paris Agreement temperature goal. And here, under this route, there are a couple of questions. You can click on each of those questions and it will further give you other opportunities that the country has and how you will, what route the country can take. And here, we can see that these guiding questions help the country to explore how is their NDC aligned to the Paris Agreement goal on, on staying below the 2-degree goal, temperature goal. Furthermore, within the same goal on aligning, there are more opportunities, and here there could be opportunities around setting targets, including economy-wide NDC targets, but also opportunities on disaggregating the data that is available and how to align the NDC to, say, the LT-LEDs, but also other relevant national policy frameworks. It could be the National Development Plan and the rest. And here is that the ultimate goal is to ensure that the NDC is informed by science, and in doing so, we hope that the different activities that are undertaken during the update reflect that the whole of society, whole of government is brought on board. And in terms of sector-specific opportunities, here, for example, we have one on energy. There are further guiding questions on the energy sector, and if you click on each of these, it will take you to the opportunities that are within the energy sector, and you can further explore how these can be brought into the NDC. I would just pause a moment for you to scan this QR code so that you can get a chance to, in your, during the coffee break perhaps, you can get a chance to really experience how the tool works. And I'm happy to answer any questions after that. And also, in the interest of time, this will be the last slide. I thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Gloria. A bit of a rundown and a superficial view to a very in-depth tool. I would suggest, whenever you're looking into that at the first place, contact the team of the support unit, UN agencies in the room. We can help you and guide you through that. We can explain a little bit more in detail about this, but it's really thought as a meta guide, as an entry point for you guys to look into your NDCs and to get some inspiration. And it's not only about mitigation, it's not only about energy, it's also about adaptation, AFULU, water, forests, gender, and so on and so forth. So with that, finally, we have a coffee break, and I'm looking at my watch. It's 11:15. Can we do it so that everybody's back here at 11:30. So we have 15 minutes coffee break. You deserve it. We all deserve it. It's beautiful outside. The venue is great. So if you're back at 11:30, so we can go to our first breakout session. Thank you so much, and enjoy the coffee, which is very famous here in Rwanda. Hello. One thing I forgot, for those of you, one second, for those of you who don't have the badge, please pick it up in the table in the back there, please.